Comics are huge on Kickstarter, and this week we'll look at 3 of them, including Ron Randall's Trekker. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. More and more, comics creators who in an earlier age would have, or perhaps actually did, have a career in mainstream comics, have instead used crowdfunding to raise the money to publish their comic. This week we'll talk to 3 people who are using Kickstarter.com to fund their comics. Later in the show, we'll talk to a publisher that's crowdfunding all their output, and an established creator who has struggled to match the success of his first Kickstarter. His project just finished. Did he make it? We'll reveal all later on. First up, Ron Randall, who you may remember I interviewed in episode 579. His pet project is Trekker, an action-adventure story starring a woman named Mercy St. Clair. His latest Kickstarter has just launched, and I talked to him recently about the current project and why he's turned to Kickstarter to publish Trekker. Okay, now I'm talking to Ron Randall, who we talked to a couple years ago when I was in Portland at Helioscope Studio. Of course, Ron did and I guess is now doing again, or has been doing recently, Trekker. So how are you doing, Ron?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Okay. We had to delay this a couple days because I was having major computer issues, but everything's working again now. So what have you been doing the past 2 years since I was there?
Well, I have had my hands pretty full. Back when we talked last, I was still doing Trekker stories and working with Dark Horse. They were my publishing partner, is the way I've come to describe it, because they were great to work with as far as giving me a lot of creative support and all the logistic support that an accomplished publishing house like Dark Horse has. But what I was finding was that just because of their particular publishing schedule needs, they've got an entire line of books they need to manage and schedule and coordinate, and the Trekker stories that I was continuing to generate were starting to pile up, and waiting like airplanes stacked over LaGuardia, waiting to find a slot in Dark Horse's publishing schedule where they could feel they had space to accommodate them. So it just started. It became clear to me that if I continued to wait and try to coordinate with Dark Horse, it was just going to take a long time for the books to come out, and they were going to come out in perhaps sort of on an irregular schedule with longer gaps between the volumes that I felt would serve the series and the readers and myself the best. So, since last we spoke, I made the drastic step, the dramatic step, whatever, of turning to Kickstarter, and I launched a campaign early last year to try to fund a new Trekker story that had been done for a while, and we just needed to get it into print, called Trekker Chapeltown. And I sort of crossed my fingers and held my breath and hit the launch button, and because I know that there are loyal Trekker fans, very dedicated fans who have remembered the series and the character fondly for years and years since I first created it, and but I didn't know exactly how big that support would be, and especially and particularly how much of it would find me on Kickstarter online. So I felt it was a big sort of leaping off the cliff, so to speak, and I was really gratified to see that the campaign hit its funding goal in about a day and a half, which was a huge relief, because as you and your listeners probably largely know by now, Kickstarter is an all or nothing proposition. Mm-hmm. You set a funding target, And if you don't hit that by the time your campaign ends in the roughly 30 days that most of these things run, then you get zero money. So it's kind of I felt it was kind of a high stakes gamble for me, since I had no idea how much support I'd actually get. Anyway, so that funded really well. I got the book into readers' hands, and we all caught our breaths. And then I launched another Kickstarter for the next book. Again, held my breath, not knowing how many people would sort of come back to support the next book. And it hit its funding goal even quickly. Within 9 hours, it had hit its initial funding target.
Wow.
Both of the campaigns did really well. Gave me the funds I needed to print the books, get them out to backers along with all the rewards, and started to pay me at least a sliver of what it takes to write and draw the actual comic book. And I'm now getting prepared to launch a third campaign that will launch on May 28th to get the next Trekker book into print.
Okay, wow. So this is already your third Kickstarter.
Yeah, and the reason, as I say, when I first turned to Kickstarter, it was because I have a lot of Trekker stories yet to tell, and I just wasn't I wasn't happy with the long gaps of time that the books were going to take to come out from Dark Horse, and so I thought, well, I need to try Kickstarter to see if there's enough support that I can actually do these books on something that's closer to what I consider the ideal schedule, which would be putting out one trade paperback roughly once every 9 months to maybe once a year, so that a new story would come out, and before it sort of like fades from people's minds and drops completely off the radar, there would be another new story come out. Those are the kind of books that I like to read, where the individual stories build on one another, and there's a certain momentum that happens. So the whole point in launching Kickstarter was to create, as I coined the hashtag, more Trekker more often. I am extremely committed to this series, to this character, and this world that I created many years ago, and it sat lying dormant for years. And so when I finally found the avenues to start getting it back into print, I was just committed to seeing this through, to get to the end of this journey. I've got a long ways to go to get there, and I'm excited to explore all the stories along the way. And it's sort of like I've got a certain amount of impatience about it, or something like that. So yeah, I want to put these Kickstarters out on a regular, ongoing basis, as long as I've got the support of the Trekker readers. Nothing's going to stop us.
Yeah. So how often are you doing these then? Like once every so many months? Yeah. My ideal schedule, is to put them out, run the Kickstarters roughly once every 9 months, give or take, as scheduling and conditions and stuff allow. But that's, if I could hit that as sort of like a ballpark average, once every 9 months, I'd feel really happy about that pace for getting the books out. Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, Kickstarter, in kind of a weird way, is becoming a competition for Diamond as a comics distributor. I
guess that might be true. I do know that I go on Kickstarter and I follow campaigns, and I pledge to support several comics being done on Kickstarter, and I am seeing a fair number of creators who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, women and men who've had pretty long careers in comics, and they are, like I did, they're turning to Kickstarter to try to finance and produce sort of passion projects, for lack of a better phrase, books that, for whatever reasons, might not fit in with some sort of major publishers, publishing schedules, books that might get lost in the cracks, not by virtue of any lack of quality or something, but just doesn't fit the formatting or whatever that the branding name that a particular company might feel like they need to pursue for the next 6 months or something. For a lot of reasons, a lot of good comic books haven't found a venue to print, and Kickstarter is enabling a lot of us to make that happen for the projects that are the nearest to our hearts.
I see. Okay, so this one is starting on May 28th and until when? When's the end?
It's going to end on June 27th. So, okay. Yeah. So about a month.
Okay. And what's the goal this time?
The targeting goal, I'm going to set the initial dollar target at 20,000. The first two campaigns, I'd set the target for 15,000, and found out in both cases that, despite the fact that I did my best to crunch the numbers and calculate all the costs, I wasn't quite right, and also the costs keep going up. Postage in particular. Everybody, talk to anybody that's run a Kickstarter about the first thing they'll say is, "Man, that postage, it's complicated, it's tricky, and you always underestimate how much those costs really are." So I need the books to at least cover the costs to produce them, and quite frankly, I need more than that to really start to pay me for the time and effort that I spend in writing the story, drawing the story, building the Kickstarter, running the Kickstarter, and fulfilling the Kickstarter. There's several jobs involved in this, and it's not like I'm complaining. This is my own bright idea, but but at the same time, to make it sustainable, I need to keep growing that audience, and I can't do this as a hobby. I don't have another job. This is the job.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, what happens in this volume? What's the promo for this volume of Trekker?
Okay. Well, I guess for those who don't know Trekker at all, the initial concept of the series is it's a science fiction series about a young woman who's a bounty hunter. That's Trekker, the series. A series of self-contained action-adventure stories, and when you string them all together, they sort of trace her gradual evolution as a character, as a human being over time. She starts off in a violent world that she sort of sees as sort of two-dimensional or black and white. She shoots people. She gets paid for it. She's really good at the job. Life doesn't need to be any more complicated than that as far as she's concerned. But right off the bat, pretty much, the readers get the sense there's a lot more going on, both inside of herself and in the larger world, bigger wheels in motion, and that she might be called upon over time to play a larger part in that. So with the latest story, it's called Trekker Battlefields. Mercy St. Clair is the name of the character, and she has recently got some insights into things from her past, raising questions, and she's pursuing the answer to those questions, and those questions will change her understanding of who she is, where she came from, and maybe what role she is going to be playing in this complex world she lives in. And in this story, Battlefield, she takes a trip to a remote quadrant of the galaxy called the Delta Quadrant, looking for answers. And she winds up flying into basically a raging war zone, and she gets caught in the crossfire. So you got somebody who's used to being a bounty hunter, tracking down one bad guy or something, and she's in the middle of a war zone. So one thing that's great fun to do as a writer and as a storyteller is to take your character and put them in a situation where they're the fish out of water. She's a character who's invested in always sort of being in control and on top of the situation. So the best thing to do with that kind of a character is have them not be that. Have them slightly off balance, and that sense of disaster is just at every turn of a page, things could go terribly wrong. So that's it's kind of a thrill ride of a tale.
I see. Now, you started this in the 80s, right? The initial first issue?
Yeah, guilty as charged. I created it back when Dark Horse was first starting out. And we could go into the origin story of the series if you want to, but yeah, it's been around a long time.
Well, I was wondering, as times have changed and you have changed, has the direction of the series changed from maybe what you initially envisioned?
Actually, no, it hasn't. I'm pretty proud of that. When the way Trekker began was, as I say, Dark Horse was just starting out. I was working at DC at the time. I had just moved back to Portland, Oregon, my hometown. I'd been living on the East Coast as I was getting some traction, getting started in the company, in the business, working for DC and some for Marvel. I just moved back to Portland. These guys came up to me at a local convention and introduced themselves as guys who were starting up a comic book company, and it was Dark Horse. And they had asked me to do some work for them because they were trying to get established pros to help their their startup company, so to speak, have a professional polish or whatever, I guess. Anyway, they said, you can come, if you come and work for us, we'll pay you and you can do what you want. And I knew I'd never hear that sentence again in my life. So, and I was right. And the way I could sort of justify leaving behind a steady gig at DC Comics, I was working on a regular monthly book, which is kind of, if you want to be in comics back then, that's what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But I said, this is a chance to propose a series that would be essentially my dream project. That was the way I saw it. So I loved science fiction. I was attracted to the idea about trying to put a young female character and immerse her in a violent world and track her development over time. So I built a series that I wanted to most tell at the time, and now all these years later, I'm still just as passionate and as excited to tell the next Trekker story. So I give myself credit for answering one question right, which is, what comic series would I like to do the most? And this is it.
Mm-hmm. I see. So are you doing a lot of conventions these days?
I guess it depends on how you define a lot, but I'm doing several. I think over the course of the year, I have probably 6 or 7 shows, something like that. I haven't counted them up.
And what do you hear from people who approach you at the conventions? Are they like Trekker fans, or they remember some of your other work? Or
yeah, I get a mixed bag at the shows. I get some people who remember, when I was drawing Justice League Europe back in the early 90s. Some people who remember a Venom miniseries I do for Marvel. Some people remember a little run I did on Supergirl books. But I'm also getting a lot of people that either do remember Trekker from back when I first did it at Dark Horse, or who have discovered it since I returned to it a few years ago. And also very gratifying to me is there are people who will come by my display, see some of the images I have, the Trekker books and prints, and something about the look of the character will catch their eye and draw them in. And then we have a little talk. Many of them have never heard of Trekker before, but when I describe it to them and they flip through some of the books, a lot of them get pretty excited and gobble up the books right away. And that's incredibly gratifying.
Now, if I remember right, you're not an artist, right? You're exclusively a writer. So who is drawing this?
Oh, no. For better or worse, I do the whole thing.
You do? Okay.
I created the series. I write it. I draw it. And now I'm also coloring and lettering the whole thing. So
have you always been the artist on it?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. My memory's faulty then. Okay.
That's okay.
Okay, so you're doing everything. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So no collaborators on anything, lettering or anything like that.
Right. I have one a young woman named Caitlin Like, who is a pretty talented artist in her own right. She does my color flatting. It's we don't need to get too into the technicalities of how you make comic book pages, but she's basically my coloring assistant. She helps set up the pages and format them, and then I do the finishing color on top of her efforts. I also have hired an editor, because I think every comic book should have an editor, mm-hmm. And every writer should have an editor. So I have a couple of people that do work with me to help keep me on track and make sure I can get the work done. But the lion's share of the work, the coming up of the story ideas, the writing of the scripts, the penciling it, the inking it, the lettering it, the coloring it, it's pretty much all on my shoulders.
I see. Yeah, well, I was wondering about the editing, because it's always good to have another pair of eyes to look at it.
Yeah, it's tremendously valuable for me. I've been lucky that when I first made the step away from Dark Horse to start producing the books on my own, I knew right away I wanted to get an editor. And fortunately, there are some pretty talented editors who do at least a certain amount of freelance editing work. First, I connected with Shauna Gore, who was a longtime editor at Dark Horse and was at the time working freelance. Then about a year ago, if I'm remembering right, she was hired full-time by Lion Forge. So she's working there now. I need to get another editor, and I found a tremendously talented young woman named Alyssa Sala, who, again, a cartoonist in her own right. She has experience working at Oni, and so she's now editing the scripts for me and looking over the art as well. She's a good comics maker, a really accomplished colorist. So, and the coloring is the part of the job that's the newest to me. So I really appreciate her feedback, both on overall story ideas and down to the details of sometimes color choices or possible color techniques I can try to bring into the work as well.
I see. Okay, great. All right, well, we'll link to the Kickstarter in the show notes for this episode. And thanks a lot for being on again. Good luck with the Kickstarter.
Thanks very much. And the link will be to trekkerkickstarter.com. It's the link you want.
Coming up, Natalie Cooper of Arledge Comics, a company that has funded all 11 of its projects and is going for number 12, an anthology of comics about Shakespeare, and Kelly Tindall, creator of the webcomic Strangebeard, on trying to duplicate his earlier Kickstarter success. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
I'm talking with Natalie Cooper of Arledge Comics. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Okay. And you're, where are you now? Lost track.
Well, I live in Toronto, but I'm currently somewhere outside of Toronto in cottage country. It's a long weekend in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
That's where I'm at.
Okay.
I live on the East Coast. Jen lives on the West Coast. We've managed to still make it work.
Okay, and yeah, what is Arledge Comics? Tell about that first.
Sure. Arledge Comics was started by Jen Arledge, who's the writer of many series like Alex Priest, Black Gold. And basically Jen decided that they wanted to publish under their own company, self-publish, as opposed to reaching out to other companies. So started their own company. Asked me. I had been editing on and off for Jen for a long time. We've been friends for nearly 10 years now, I think. And so yeah, as soon as Jen wanted to start the company, they said, will you be my editor? And I said, yeah. So it's steadily grown since then. We've got, I think, 11 successfully funded titles.
Wow.
10 which have come out. So it's a pretty cool independent company out of Washington in the United States.
Yeah. So are you funding everything you do through Kickstarter?
So far, yes.
Wow.
A little bit out of pocket, but mostly Kickstarter.
It's interesting. So yeah, I've been hearing that Kickstarter is sort of displacing Diamond to some extent as far as comics distribution.
We do have a comics distributor. I believe Emerald Comics is the distributor in the U.S.
Okay.
Been working on getting a Canadian distributor on my end, but yeah, we do have a distributor. But for online sales, for original pre-orders, stuff like paying the artists, we always go to Kickstarter.
Okay, so tell us about the current Kickstarter.
Right. Well, our current Kickstarter is for an anthology of comics based on Shakespeare. So they can be about Shakespeare himself, retellings of his works, adaptations of his comics, about people within his sphere, and it's called My Kingdom for a Panel, which is a reference to Richard III.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got about, I think, 26 comics. It's nearly 200 pages. It's black and white, like a really incredibly, and not to toot my own horn, incredibly curated, wonderful anthology on Kickstarter for funding.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't know if people might have heard of some of the people involved. I don't know who is involved in the project.
We've got a lot of people. We've got Micah Welch, Beth Barnett. We have the artists from Alex Priest, Scott Malin. We have Bryce Beale, Drew Dillon. We have a lot of people. Sonia Kinsey. We have this gorgeous cover done by Mitchie. So we have a lot. We have Andrea Rosales. We have so many people. Diana Raquel. I could go on and on. But there are some people, wrote and drew their own comics. Some teamed up with someone else to write, and someone else drew. So there are just a lot of teams on this.
Yeah.
Some great art from Emmett Helen is in there. Just a lot of people.
Yeah, looking at your Kickstarter page, I mean, there are a lot of different art styles there, but they all look really good. There aren't any slouches there.
No, we were pretty meticulous in vetting all the people who were going to be in there. Not vetting. It wasn't like an interrogation process or anything, but we made sure that there were people who we would want to work with.
I'm particularly curious about, there's one panel here from Exit Pursued by a Bear. It appears to be three bears involved in Shakespeare in some way. What is that about?
Okay, so that's actually about, how familiar are you with A Winter's Tale?
A little bit. It's not, I don't think we read that one in college.
For the uninitiated, A Winter's Tale has a famous scene where a character exits pursued by a bear. There is a literal bear who chases the character off the stage.
I do remember
that. So that particular comic, which was written by, I want to say Heather Keneally, that particular comic is about the bear in A Winter's Tale who has spent their entire life wanting to be an actor. And has sort of, their bear parents are not necessarily understanding why the bear wants to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely not a version of A Winter's Tale that anyone will have seen before.
I see. Okay, yeah, maybe I did read that in college, now that I think about it, because I remember that bit of it.
If you're a Harry Potter fan, that's where the name Hermione comes from.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Although unrelated to the bear.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so, well, as we're recording this, you still have 19 days to go. It'll be less than that when this goes up, but
20 if you're on this side of the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure, because it's, a day later here. So what do you've been doing a lot of these, but what do you do to promote your Kickstarters?
So usually social media is a great tool.
Mm-hmm.
Jen has a lot of followers on social media because Jen has a pretty big following through all of their work. So between that, we're getting all of the contributors, all of the people who created the comics, to also push it on their social media. We have newsletters that go out. Jen is actually going to be at the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival this weekend, so they'll be pushing it at any convention they go to, really. And we sent out some advanced review copies, so we're hoping to get some advanced reviews that'll bring some attention to it. So mainly just using the power of the internet and social media to try and get the word out there.
Mm-hmm.
Which has worked so far. We're at a little bit over 50% funded. When I last checked, I believe 52%.
It is a little over 50. I don't see an exact percent, but looking at the amounts. It looks like you're on a good course here to complete it, to make your goal. What's your track record as far as making your goals, if you've done so many of these?
Like I said, we have successfully funded 11 projects so far. So,
okay, 100%. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not looking to break that record.
Yeah, to break that
And
streak.
I'm fairly confident. I think that this comic is going to appeal to a lot of people. I think Shakespeare as a medium, it's inaccessible for some because of the iambic pentameter. And this anthology makes it accessible because it's in the common tongue. You know, the marriage of, you know, picture and word as a medium makes it more accessible for a lot of people. So I think there's a pretty wide range of people who will be interested and really enjoy it.
Okay, good.
And I'm fairly confident that in the last 20 days, we're going to push it over the top.
Okay. Do you have any advice for other people who might want to do a Kickstarter?
Yeah, my advice is to go in prepared. You know, I've seen a lot of Kickstarters fail just because they haven't really thought through the cost of everything. I mean, you have to be careful with how much you're paying contributors. You know, for example, using the anthology, we had to be careful with how much money we were paying the contributors per page, factoring that into what our eventual printing costs would be, shipping costs, reward costs. You know, I think a lot fail because maybe they're not 100% thought through from the beginning. You need to know how much you need to make and, you know, pad it a little bit because, you know, there's always a chance things could go wrong. But Jen has actually appeared on a couple of panels talking about their successes with Kickstarting. And I think you can always reach out to other people who've had successful Kickstarters for advice. I think it's a really kind community of these creators, especially on Twitter. So my number one recommendation would be think things through and do the math properly. And my number two would be reach out to someone who you respect, who it's worked for.
Okay. Oh, and I should have asked you, what rewards do you have? What are your incentives and so forth on this for backers?
Oh, okay. Well, we have both print and digital copies of the comic. First off, we actually just reached a community goal where the print copy is going to have this gorgeous gold foil in the cover. As well, we have a really cute pin that is it's a happy dagger, Romeo and Juliet. And so it's a little dagger with a little smile. We have some stationery sets. So it's a notebook that has the same cover as the comic. There is an eraser that says "Out Damn Spot," which is a Macbeth reference. Yeah. And there are pencils that are going to have me and Jen's favorite Shakespearean quotes on them. There are commissions. Some of the creators offer to do commissions as tiers, so you can get a commission from some of them, like Ben Asumi, Mei-Lian Ho, Emmett Helen. I know there's another one who's going to kill me when I'm done this podcast. And Andrea Rosales, I want to say. If it's not Andrea, sorry, Andrea. So basically on the higher ends of the tiers, you could get commissions of, you know, if you want to bust of something, one of your favorite characters, an original character, what have you. And then on the lower end, you can get print digital copies, fun stationery items, and this like really adorable pin. Oh, and a bookmark, a really fun bookmark, which is like based on a sexy body pillow, but it's Shakespeare.
I see. Okay, great. Okay, well, good luck with this then.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your interest and for having me on.
Sure.
Love your podcast.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, I'm talking with Kelly Tindall, who is usually based in Edmonton, not in Edmonton right now. How are you doing, Kelly?
I'm good. I'm in sunny, and by sunny I mean rainy, Moncton, New Brunswick at the moment.
Okay. So Kelly's also doing a Kickstarter. Unfortunately, it's going to run out really soon, and I'm not going to get this up in time. But I did want to talk to him about the project because I pledged to it, and the comic looks interesting, and I'd like to see it. So tell us about this book that you're kickstarting.
Well, it's interesting. I first started doing it as like just kind of a lark, and it ended up launching my career, and now it's still a lark that I get to do in my spare time from the career that spawned, basically. It's called Strangebeard, and it's about the world's deadliest pirate who's also a 12-year-old girl.
Okay.
Kind of the long. And what we're doing with the Kickstarter this go is reprinting the first issue, which is completely sold out, and printing, or not, sorry, first trade paperback, which has the first 5 issues, and printing for the first time the second story. So the 6th to 10th issues.
Okay, now these have been coming out as individual issues before, or
individual pages on my webcomic.
on your web? It's your webcomic, okay.
Yeah, but I've been, like, my background before I got into webcomics was comics. I got started at Image Comics about 11 years ago, working doing backup stories for a book called Proof by Alex Gresham and Riley Rossmo.
I remember hearing
my art
of
is
it,
always, it's a great book. I wish they would reprint it, especially the issues that I worked on. But so I've always had a fondness for like 22 to 32 page issues of things. I like having that sort of natural endpoint for cliffhangers and climaxes and things like that.
So about Strangebeard, yeah, I have not looked at the webcomic either, but so is this like her imagination, or how does this work?
Oh, it's very real. On the night of her 12th birthday, servant girl Jenny Brigham is given for a present the hat of the long-dead pirate emperor Augustus Strangebeard. And when she puts it on her head, she is immediately gifted with all of his magical powers, but also the enmity and wrath of the 7 super pirates who originally killed him. So now she has to get together a crew, find a ship, and give it out on the water before the first and deadliest of those pirates comes for her.
Okay, so it's not like Calvin and Hobbes where he's imagining everything.
Nope, nothing of the sort. It's just straight ahead, all ages action story.
Okay. How long ago did you start Strangebeard?
I'm not exactly sure what the beginning point was. I do know that the Kickstarter for the first Strangebeard was almost exactly 5 years ago to the day when I launched this one. There was a bit of an extra hiatus in there because I got accidentally kind of successful doing other stuff, so that kind of pushed it to the back burner. But I've been at it for, I'd say, about 6 years. And then there was also the time before that when I was pitching it as a regular miniseries to comic book companies. And that was probably a solid 2 years or so. So it's been around for a while. I originally wanted to do it as like a Calvin and Hobbes type strip where it was going to be a serialized story told over 4 panels. Kind of like Floyd Gottfridson's old Mickey Mouse stories that were like a continuous narrative that went on, but it was just 4 panels that you would see, once a day in a newspaper. Same type of thing.
Okay. Now, while you've been working on this, you said you'd been getting successful at other things. Were those also like comics stuff or illustration, or what else have you been doing?
A little of both. My primary gig right now is it's still luckily comics. We just had released the first 2 volumes that I illustrated from an ongoing historical biography series called Show Me History. Now they've the company's Portable Press, and they're releasing. Well, the first batch was 4 books, and I did 2 of them. I did one called The Fighting Founding Father, which is about Alexander Hamilton, and the second one was about Amelia Earhart. It was called Pioneer of the Sky. And it looks like it's a successful enough series that it's going to be a yearly thing. The plan right now is 5 books for 2020, and I'll be illustrating another 2 of those.
Okay, now are those also Kickstarted, or is that just regular publishing? Or
regular old book. Portable Press is an imprint of Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
So they've got plenty of muscle. So the books have been solicited for months now. You can get them pretty much anywhere. You can get them at Amazon or Chapters or Indigo, wherever you find your books. Although I'm always telling people, of course, the best thing to do, of course, is to buy it from your local comic book store or independent bookstore.
Okay. So how have you been going about promoting this current Kickstarter?
It's interesting. The first few Kickstarters that I did were different. This is the 3rd one now. And I'm doing a lot of the same stuff, but I'm very interested in how it's been different, for sure. Like I've done doing the regular stuff. This is one of many podcasts I've had the good fortune to be guest on. So thank you for that, of course. And I've done the regular thing, the social media blast, 3 on Twitter, 1 on Facebook a day kind of thing. Talking to a lot of people. I have an email list of people to talk to. And of course, just talking to people who supported my other projects as well, who I know would be interested in this one that for whatever reason wouldn't see it. A lot of people, I think perhaps justifiably, are giving up on Facebook for whatever reason. So it's been very hard to reach people that way. And also because they realize that people are making money off of their backs. So they're Facebook in particular is really bad for burying Kickstarters so that people don't see them. So your engagement, like you put something like I did a signing, for example, last night at a comic book store in Halifax in Nova Scotia. And my engagement on that one was huge because there were no buzzwords in there to let Facebook know to bury it. There was no like Kickstarter or campaign or crowdfund or anything like that wasn't in there. So that one got a lot of engagement, whereas I'll put something for the actual Kickstarter itself and the engagement will be limited at best. But again, if somebody shares it or retweets it or whatever, that engagement goes up considerably because people actually have the opportunity to see it.
I see. Okay. Now, as we're talking right now, you've got about 4 days to go, and you're only about halfway there. So
yeah.
Now, of course, I know that Kickstarters tend to pick up speed as they get towards the end, but and hopefully that will happen. But if it doesn't, then what's the next step?
I'm just going to burn all of the pages, all the original artwork. I'm just going to have a big bonfire. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because I had the first Strangebeard Kickstarter was quite successful. I think it did something like 137%. So that was marvelous. I got to really juice up the books. And then I did one for my diary comic, The Adventurers. I did a hardcover for that one. And that one was a bit more of a slog. And I thought it was simply because of the different subject matter. Because it was a diary comic about children, whereas Strangebeard is a full-color book about action and adventure and that sort of thing. But I'm finding the exact same problems getting the word out on the Strangebeard one, which is a book that, again, people have been asking me for consistently for 5 years. I'm having the same problems with that one that I did with the original diary one, which is interesting to me. So that's been interesting, too, because, I mean, you learn a lot more from falling on your face than you do from having the same type of success every time. And it's not the end of the world. I mean, just because you don't have a successful Kickstarter doesn't mean that you can't run it again. One of my concerns has been maybe that people think that they have to get both books instead of just one, because I'm doing a reprint as well, which is the reason I'm asking for as much money as I can, because if I were to be doing comic book conventions, say, next year for next con season, it would be foolish to have copies of your second volume of an epic and not the first. So I'm interested to see if I ran it just as the second one at half the price, if it would be easy to sell for people. Maybe people are just confused. You know, that might be part of it. So I don't know if I'm going to run it as an individual thing or get another head of steam or put together a stronger sort of blast of promotion before I head out. I did a pretty decent job this time, I thought, but, you know, results speak for themselves, right? So clearly something needs to evolve in my approach. But again, it might be a success at the end, too. They have a tendency to roller coaster at the beginning and the end. I mean, we did probably a quarter of the book within the first weekend. Like, there was a lot of goodwill right out of the gate. There's thousands. Like, I literally launched the Kickstarter and then drove to Calgary, Alberta for a comic book show. And by the time I was there, it was up over $1,000. It was really, really gratifying to see. But then, like anything else, it kind of stalled in the middle. It's continually stalled, and there's still people, like, it's been very consistent, but that consistency has not been in a way that is going to guarantee, you know, a positive result. So, again, I'm curious to see how it's going to go. It's promoted much discussion because I've been doing a lot of cons the last little bit, and people have been asking me what I think about it.
I see. Well, whatever you end up doing, whether it succeeds or fails, let me know, and I'll have you on again, and I'll read the webcomic next time, so we can have a little more to talk about. I was wondering if you have any advice for other people who want to kickstart something.
Gosh, it's tough right now. There's a couple of things that I think are perennial bits of good advice. Your first Kickstarter, when you do it, you're going to have a lot of goodwill. There are going to be people that want you to succeed. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be excited about your project, and they're going to be excited about your first project. So a lot of people are going to be willing to help, and they won't the second time. That's an interesting one. And certainly not to the same extent. Like, a lot of people, they'll put a bunch in the first one. The second one, they'll be like, okay, I'll get one issue or something. I'm going to get the thing. I'm not going to get the full, like, $700 meal deal or anything like that. Generally speaking, I would keep a first Kickstarter between $5,000 and $10,000, especially if it's a printing thing. you're going to print something in black and white, you don't need more than a couple of $1,000s, and that's probably a smart way to go if it's a first thing. 7,000 seems to be the sweet spot for a lot of first Kickstarters, at least in comics. I don't know what it is for other things. If I was doing an animated series based on a Dungeons and Dragons game or something, I could probably reasonably expect a couple of 100,000. But when it comes to comics, keep it modest. Do a lot of promotion, talk to a lot of people, do a lot of podcasts. I think that helps a lot to have people know how passionate you are about it, how excited you are to do the project and how you really want to do the project. And that doesn't always come through in your video. It doesn't always come through in the way that you write something, because you can't really necessarily communicate that. And doing the video is just like, you need a good video for sure. If you have somebody that can help you with editing or lighting or can sort of like help walk you through that process, that's really great, because it's not very much fun, at least to my mind. But it is a necessary part of the project. And, lots of colorful buttons, banners, really good extra incentives. Stickers were a big one the first time around. I don't know that I would go with T-shirts or anything like that. You don't want something that's going to increase. Again, this is just comic stuff. Like, I have zero perspective on anything besides that. Mm-hmm. But you don't want something that's going to drastically increase the weight of the package. Let's say you've got the comic and it's 5 ounces, and your post office is going to charge you extra to send something that's 5 1/4 ounces. Make sure it's 5 ounces. Like, I had that problem with the first Kickstarter. I was over by like a 1/4 ounce or something like that, and suddenly every bit of mailing went from $5 to $10, and that eats up a whole schwack of stuff. And look into ways of saving money on postage. You can get a venture card if you're in Canada, and that saves a little bit on sending packages. There are fulfillment people like BackerKit, that kind of thing, that can do the work for you if you're dealing in large volumes. And then other stuff too that I don't really get into, like Amazon and that kind of thing. I just dislike Amazon generally. It's a cultural Unicron like behemoth that's just eating up publishing. It makes me a little bit fearful, so I always push people towards that. I guess, does that answer your question? Yeah.
That sounds good. Okay, well, hopefully when this actually comes out, I'll have good news to report after when I do the voiceover at the end. But if not, I'm looking forward to you trying it again, and we'll get the word out next time.
Yeah, I'm feeling like if it doesn't end up having the first time, I may wait until either the fall or maybe next year in the early stages. Again, when you launch a Kickstarter, don't do it when people don't have any money. So don't
right after Christmas.
Exactly. Like, wait till people get their tax return, or do it well ahead of Christmas so that you can hype that as some people can get it for, like, I've got an all ages book, so it's an easy sell for kids for Christmas, that kind of thing. So that, it really depends on when you want to have this thing out. That's why I was doing it during the summer here. I have kind of like a window between the 2 history books that I'm doing, so that's why I did it now. But because I would be able to finish everything by Christmas, but now it looks like I might have to wait until next year if it doesn't end up. I mean, it might. Who knows? I'm very hopeful about the thing. I think there's going to be a Hail Mary at the end. I just don't know to what extent.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot for being on, and good luck.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Kelly did manage to pull out a win. His Kickstarter was funded at the last moment. He tells me that he got a lot of last-minute help from his friends, family, and fans, with one person boosting her pledge by nearly $500. He says it was really white knuckle. Congratulations, Kelly. All the Kickstarters discussed in this episode are linked from the show notes. Tell us what you think. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or contact us through social media. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We have a pretty active Facebook group, so please sign up for some interesting comics discussion. Support the show by pledging at patreon.com/deconcomics. Pledge at least $4 a month to get our bi-weekly series Spider-Man 1963 and our new series Tim Catches Up on the MCU, in which I finally start watching all the Marvel movies I missed. We started with Thor, the first one, and we'll be getting to Captain America the First Avenger in the next few weeks. Pledge at least $4 a month to get both of our additional series. Also, please help us get noticed by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. We'd really appreciate it if you gave us a star rating there and a short review. Our theme is from bensound.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Mulele and I will be here next week to talk about 2 more comics submitted by their creators. And in 2 weeks, Coom, Sam, and Rob discuss the first Wolverine miniseries from 1982 by Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. Till next week, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.